Hello there! It's Friday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever. The only movie podcast to offer objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, and with me as always, on a steel horse he rides, is Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Lovely. We're back. Don't call it a comeback.
Well, it is. It is one.
It is a comeback. Okay. I'm just going to lay my cards on the table here. Before we get into our traditional preamble, I'm going to say, last week was my fault. I poisoned myself with chicken. I'm sorry, alright? I'm sorry.
The chicken poisoned you, Konrad, alright? We're not going to let you take the blame.
Technically it did, but I mean, that's sort of like saying that the cyanide poisoned the spy rather than the person who, like, stabbed him in the leg with an umbrella. It's sort of, I feel like it's...
What? Are you referencing something there?
Do you remember was it the 80s? I think it was in the 80s in like the UK. There was like some defected Soviet spy who was killed on a bridge in England because some KGB guys walked past him and stabbed him in the leg with an umbrella that had like a syringe in the tip.
Oh, right. Was that in the 80s? I know.
It might not have been the 80s, to be fair.
That's very topical, very topical. But I'll say,
yeah.
to be honest with you, I don't think... I'm sure it happened throughout history, but in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, someone has died from a Russian spy in the UK. So I don't know if that's the exact same thing. If it is,
that was the Salisbury Novichok poisoning.
That's the one.
But they're always at it. They're always bloody at it, those Russians. As well we can see in the world that we're living in at the moment. How are you apart from the grim international state of affairs?
Well, I'm doing all right, to be honest with you. Just chilling away. Luckily, unfortunately for the people of Ukraine, what's happening right now, strength for them. We're in a part of the world which is not going through that at the minute. Which, to be honest with you, I'm just counting my lucky blessings at the minute that's the case.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Yeah. So we also have somewhere to flee to should the UK become embroiled in it, because Ireland stays neutral. They did in World War II, and if Hitler wasn't enough to rile them, I don't know if Putin will be. We'll see.
Yeah, it remains to be seen what extremes the world will need to go to wake the sleeping giant that is Ireland.
Well, they are taking a lot of refugees in, so it's not like they're doing nothing. They are kind of taking a side, but officially on paper, they kind of don't take a side. A bit like Switzerland. But okay, so this film, I can't wait to talk about it, Konrad. I just want to say one thing.
Go on.
Okay, before we do the let's get into it. Are we going to give any credence to the mustache man from the end of The Big Lebowski saying
Sam Elliott?
Did you hear Sam Elliott? Did you hear about his comments?
No. What did he say about this movie?
He said that cowboys ain't supposed to look like Chippendales.
In reference to The Power of the Dog?
Yes.
Who in this movie looks like a Chippendale? Is he talking about Jesse Plemons?
I think he must be being homophobic, but we'll get into it.
That's a real shame. If that's not 24. No, it's more than 24 hours ago, but it was definitely within the last week. I was talking about how fucking cool Sam Elliott seems, and like how he's like a man that was essentially, when you think of an actor who was designed to be typecast in westerns, Sam Elliott is the man that you think of. So to hear that is very, very, very depressing. If that's the case. I mean, we've started, so let's just get into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay, we'll stick the title break in there, or maybe not. Maybe we've just gone straight in.
Sometimes
knows?
we do that. Yeah.
Movies. We're back to talk about them. So, okay, we're here to talk about The Power of the Dog. That was not enunciated well at all. The Power of the Dog.
Power of the Dog. Power of the Dog.
Power of the Dog. That was a bit... I went a bit sort of Brad Pitt in Snatch there with that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting... It's a very kind of like ambiguous title that reveals itself through the mysteries of the movie. But before we talk about that, we've got to do our due diligence. We talked a little bit about the Oscars 2 weeks ago, I think. It's been so long that I can't actually remember if we did, but I assume we did, because what were we doing if not discussing it, at least in brief, the Oscars?
Well, we will be.
We're going to now. Yeah. I'm making a point of doing it.
Let's do it.
So, okay, in the space of this is hilarious. In the space of 2 weeks, the Academy has announced that it was cutting the categories of documentary short, editing, makeup and hairstyling, original score, production design, live action short, animated short, and sound design from its TV broadcast. Basically replicating some plans that it came up with the year before, that when they announced it, everyone said, hey, fuck off. And then they rolled it back. They've announced it again this year, and then within a week, everyone said once again, hey, fuck off. Like, this isn't just about, maybe cut down on the enormous speeches and like the big red carpet sections and like before you start getting rid of these less popular, I guess, categories. And they backpedaled once again to say they will be in the broadcast, but they're just going to cut them down massively because they don't want to show people like walking up to the stage. They'll be interspersed throughout the broadcast. And when pushed, the Academy spokesperson said, when asked whether all the like A-list presenters and celebrities would be present while these awards were being presented, they confirmed that no, they would not, because all the celebrities would still be out on the red carpet. So they're being big. They're being the bigger person, the Academy, and they're saying, I'll tell you what, we'll leave it on TV, but they'll be presented in front of an empty room. How about that? And
is this because the actors are complaining that they have to wait around while all these nobodies get all their thing?
I mean, that they might be doing that, but the problem is that last year's Oscars, the 2021 Oscars, were the lowest rated in history, and there's basically a push to keep the broadcast under 3 hours. So they're trying to find a way to shorten it. And rather than maybe cut out all of the bullshit that is in the Oscars presentation, they have decided to just cut categories. And like, I don't like the idea of like ranking the importance of categories, but editing's really important to a movie. That's like, I'm not saying I could understand like makeup and hairstyling going or documentary short going, because they're all important. But editing is like, you might as well fucking ditch cinematography at that point. Like, what are we doing here, guys?
When I watch, I don't know about you, Conrad. When I watch the Oscars, right, I am waiting for. Now, don't get me wrong. Hugh Jackman's opening number was great, right? Have an opening number.
Sure.
2-3 minutes. Don't have to be 85 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right in saying instead of like getting rid of all that the little stuff they have and all the little entertainment bits and everything, they're now having a load of songs. I mean, okay, like I'd rather have the categories in there than have all of the best songs performed.
Yeah.
So when I watch the Oscars, I want to fast forward, and in fact, in recent years, maybe I'm contributing to this. Lack of viewership. I just like to watch, on YouTube, all of the speeches and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather them just go, and they're the winner. Okay, next one. Our nominees are blah blah blah. They're the winner. We don't need to feel like we're watching like a late night show from America with awards as well. We have that all the time. Yeah. We don't need like so and so celebrity making jokes. We don't need. As much as the classic clips are there, like Will Ferrell and Jack Black doing the Oscar speech, the music song and all, it's good. But I think I would rather have more. Not only that, Conrad, this is the thing that's annoyed me for years, and I know a lot of people in Hollywood are annoyed by this as well. Why is there no award for stuntmen?
I continue to not understand why stunts aren't rewarded in any way. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's no good argument for it, apart from the fact that they just don't historically have it, so they're going to continue not having it, which...
Well, Tom Cruise would win it every year. They wouldn't even give it to a stuntman. They wouldn't even give it to a stuntman or woman. He'd just give it to Tom Cruise.
No, yeah, that'd be another example of A-list celebrities stealing awards from the working men and women of Hollywood. Yeah, I don't know. There's no good reason for that, but it does blow my mind that they don't just... Because I'm the same as you. I very rarely stay up to watch it. I catch the highlights of the speeches and the winners on YouTube or whatever, and that's normally enough for me, because normally the speeches are a bit dry and I don't need to sit through someone talking for 10 minutes. But there's no way, if you're telling that, I can't remember how many categories there are. I think it's like 18 categories. There's no way that you couldn't get through that in 3 hours if you just cut down, like do 5 categories and then have a comedy comedy skit. You just don't do one after every fucking category. You know, like we don't need to see that much Steve Martin, guys. All right, or Alec Baldwin or whoever's doing it. It won't be Alec Baldwin this year. Let's be honest. He's got his own problems to deal with.
Who is the host of?
It's three women comedians, I think.
See, this is actually something I was saying to my wife as well. Actually, I hate that. I don't understand. Like, every time I would be offended if I was a woman. Every time that they have a female present one of these shows, it's always two or three. It's always two or three. Why can't they pick one and have her be the host? Like, it's like they're like, oh, we're going to be really, really progressive. We're going to choose a woman.
You're going to have women.
Actually, we're going to be so progressive.
One can't
we're going to not trust. We're not trusting one. We're going to have three, just in case you get sick of her.
Yeah.
You know, I hate it. Just have one woman. What's wrong with one woman?
Yeah. Well, it's Amy Schumer, Wanda Sykes, and Regina Hall. I don't know Wanda Sykes that well, but Regina Hall is
Wanda Sykes is funny.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen Wanda Sykes in anything, but I mean, I'm sure they'll be funny. They seem like good choices, but as you say, they don't trust it to be one. They're like, we'll pick a woman, but she's gonna need a little help. So let's.
It sounds to me like they wanted to pick Amy Schumer, and then they realized, oh no, she's gonna get a load of crap from the fact that she stole all those jokes back in the day. So now they're like sort of putting Wanda Sykes and stuff to cushion the blow of that.
This dark cloud of plagiarism following her. Like, oh no, we've done a bad job of picking Oscar hosts who have then been cancelled in one way or another, and Amy Schumer's going to be the next one. So the reason that I wanted to ham-fistedly shove some Oscar chat in here before we started in earnest on Power of the Dog is because obviously Power of the Dog is nominated for the Best Picture Oscar and is getting a lot of buzz. It might actually be considered the front runner of
interesting
of the group. So how many have you seen of the Best Picture nominees? So it's Drive My Car, Don't Look Up, that Guillermo del Toro one, Nightmare Alley, Power of the Dog. I can't remember the names of the other ones. That's awful, but.
Well, based on what you just said, at least two of them. I've only seen Power of the... June, yeah. So I've seen three. June, Power of the Dog, and that other one. The one you hated. Don't Look Up.
Yeah, no idea
so I've seen at least three. I'll tell you what, in the past I've tried to watch all the nominees before it's happened, and I think I only succeeded on that like twice. I'm probably not going to push myself,
But, because the thing is, as Don't Look Up proves, whenever there's a list of Best Picture nominees, only about half of them are actually good films, and the rest of them, they're just like...
Well, according to you.
According to most people, to be honest. Like, based on...
Don't Look Up was very highly loved by many, many people, especially our audience. Most people in the comments, Konrad, sided with me in that one.
Well, no account.
Having said that, I will say, again, I didn't love that film, but it's just so funny. Like, that was a good episode.
No account for taste. That's all I'm going to say there. I'm not coming after you if you enjoyed that movie. All I'm saying is, Adam McKay is a bad filmmaker and shouldn't be allowed to make films anymore.
Little plug, guys. If you didn't hear that episode, go back and listen to it because Konrad had some hot takes on Saucy.
It surprises me that because I didn't actually think they were that hot at the time. But then, that episode came out and apparently they were scaldingly hot, according to, the responses of people who, in our audience.
They were scaldingly hot. But there's also another way of viewing them, and that's that they're wrong. But we're not getting into it. Go and listen to that episode, guys. It is great.
I'll direct you to the opening segment, I guess. I don't know industry speak of this podcast, which states that we are objective in our opinions here. So there's no way it's literally impossible that I could have been wrong about any of those.
But it's impossible that I could be wrong as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really interesting.
Therein lies the flaw with the format. Anyway, Power of the Dog. I think this is of the Best Picture nominees that I've seen thus far. I think this is one of the best ones. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is a Jane Campion movie who I've not really seen much of her stuff before, but I've always heard good things about the movies that she has directed. And she wrote this herself. She adapted it from a novel by a guy called Thomas Savage of the same name, which I think was written in the 60s. And it's basically... it's sort of, I suppose, setting wise, it evokes a kind of There Will Be Blood kind of America. Like, it's very gothic, very beautifully presented, but somehow distant vision of the late American West. And it basically tells the story of I think she's widowed. I actually didn't catch whether she was widowed or just divorced.
They called her a suicide bride. Now, I need to know what that means, because I thought maybe she's widowed, or maybe a man knew he was going to die, or knew he was going to commit suicide, and therefore married her so that his son would be left to her. I didn't actually. It was a very interesting dynamic there, which I just didn't know the history of the term or what was going on. You know?
Yeah, I didn't even catch that term actually. But so I think it's safe to say that her husband or former husband is no longer in the picture for one reason or another. She has a sort of young. Well, he's not that young. He's probably 16, 17 at this point. Maybe actually a bit older than that. Maybe he's sort of. I think because he's going away to college.
He's gone off to university, isn't he?
Yeah, so he'll be like 18, 19. So Kirsten Dunst plays this widow or divorcee with a teenage son played by Cody smit-mcphee, who is wonderful in this movie, and she comes into contact with Jesse Plemons, who is amazing in everything that he's in, and Benedict Cumberbatch, who are a pair of rancher brothers who live out in this old kind of mansion house where they rustle horses and raise horses. I don't think you rustle horses. I don't know if that's the right verb for that. I think you rustle cats.
Wrangle.
Sure, wrangle. There's, I mean, we can all agree that there's plenty of hootin' and tootin' going on this among the ranchers on this ranch. So she meets Jesse Plemons. There's a whirlwind romance, and she goes to live with him and his incredibly vindictive, manipulative, but sort of oddly. I don't know if I'd call him charismatic.
I was gonna say straight away. Anything you were going positive there, I was like, no. I don't
there's
agree.
Definitely there's a power to him.
Power of the dog.
Quite possibly, yes. We'll investigate that further. So, okay, the first thing I wanted to say about this movie is that I think you need. I wanted to get your take on this. In my head, after I finished watching it, I was like, that felt like there's two very distinct acts. There's the first hour where essentially nothing happens. Like, I mean, it's very slow in revealing what it's doing, and then there's a second hour where it really reveals what it's actually about. And that second hour is fantastic, I thought. Did you kind of feel the same way about that?
Yeah, like, obviously we're not going to get into spoilers just yet, but I felt the first hour, I'm going to be honest, Konrad, I tried to do a Konrad. You know how in the past we've had moments in films where you've just plotted the whole movie out from just like the opening or whatever. So I thought to myself, okay, this guy is clearly being painted as a hyper-masculine man who cannot deal with the world modernizing and moving on and being more progressive, and therefore to the point where he doesn't even shower, he doesn't even bath in the house, he baths in a river, he's always dirty, he's always smelly, and he just doesn't want to progress. And I thought, this is a tale as old as time, I've seen this 100 times before, it is what it is. And I turned to Emma about 20 minutes in and I said, I don't like this character. I don't think from where it is, I'm going to be able to go on this journey with him to become more modern and to accept the world changing. And I was like, so I said, already I'm judging this film. Now, as we'll get into later, it turned into something way different than that.
Yeah.
I sort of, you've seen Emma, haven't you?
Yes.
With Anya Taylor-Joy. So, you know, in Emma, there's a moment where, like, at the without spoiling it, but there's a moment at like a picnic where she insults someone, and it completely turns the film into something different for the second half. I don't know if there was a particular moment. There was a moment in this, but it wasn't one character saying something to another. It was just a moment where a reveal happens potentially, and that is the moment which changes the film. A bit like Emma, how the whole second film is completely different. Yeah. And I was so happy to see the change because as I say, what they were telling in the first half before that reveal, I wasn't into it really.
Yeah, no, I think I was exactly the same. I was almost reluctant to watch this, to be honest, because I and we'll talk about him in a second before we get into spoilers, but I was kind of looking at the stills of Benedict Cumberbatch as this like rancher, and I was like, Benedict Cumberbatch is a cowboy. I'm not buying that at all. Like, he's
the thing, yeah.
He's a fine actor, but I was like, I'm not. He looks a bit ridiculous, and if this is just going to be this very grim depiction of this a mother and her teenage son basically suffering the barbs of this horrible man as they eke out a pretty brutal existence in the sort of dying days of the American West, that doesn't sound super appealing. And it kind of, I suppose it kind of is that for the first hour, it's essentially you're living with these characters for most of that first hour, and I think it's from how I felt about it once the movie finished. I look back at it and I thought that first hour really asks you to follow essentially three aspects of the movie that I think are kind of holding it up in that first hour, and that's Ari Wegner's cinematography, which is beautiful. There's a lot of like very long lingering shots of landscapes or the house, and it is stunning.
The landscape sometimes for me felt like a miniature or something.
Yeah.
Like the way they were shot made them feel like a bit unreal in some way.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And it is beautiful, but I think there's going to be a lot of people out there who just find long still shots of landscapes or of towns quite boring. And that's fair enough. But so I don't think you'll necessarily enjoy that. Johnny Greenwood's score, which is... I feel like Johnny Greenwood is just... always fucking great when he writes a score for
well, yeah, he also brings a little bit, even though it was quite different, but as soon as you see his name in the credits for the score, you think to yourself, okay, we're back in There Will Be Blood territory here. You know, it's not an accident that they got him to do the score for me.
No, I don't think so. And you are right. I think there is I wouldn't describe it as like exactly the same kind of thing, but it is it is evocative. It is evocative of the score that he did for There Will Be Blood in 2008. Interestingly enough, actually, talking about these Ari Wegner and Johnny Greenwood. So I think it's worth pointing out that Ari Wegner was specifically hired for this because Jane Campion wanted a female cinematographer, which is just great to see. Always nice to get some female cinematographers, and a lot of Wegner's cinematography in this was trying to evoke period photography that she had found in like books, which I think she succeeded in doing. And then the interesting thing about Johnny Greenwood that I read while doing some research about this movie after seeing it is that Benedict Cumberbatch's character Phil, he's Phil. He plays the banjo in this movie and plays it very well. Yeah. And this is kind of heartbreaking, to be honest. Benedict Cumberbatch, as part of the preparation for this role, learned to play the banjo, among other things. He learned to ride a horse. He learned to... I've got a list here. Oh, yeah. So he learned to ride a horse. He learned to play a banjo. See if you can guess what the third thing he learned actually how to do is. You'll never guess it.
Make a rope?
He learned how to do that, but no, the third thing I had down was he learned how to castrate a bull for this.
Oh, of course.
Which is... We'll come back to that in a second, because holy smokes, I was not ready for that. But the point is that Benedict Cumberbatch learned how to play the banjo for the purposes of this performance, and Johnny Greenwood listened to the performance of Benedict Cumberbatch, who must have put in a lot of time learning how to practice it, and he said that's not good enough, and he did his own banjo in the score, which I just imagine you're Benedict Cumberbatch. It's like, well, that was 100 hours wasted, like learning how to play these pieces of music. But
well, I would imagine Benedict Cumberbatch is the type of actor who sort of felt like he wanted to do it to get into the role anyway. But like I knew the way they were cutting away from him playing, that it wasn't him playing. Like, it was pretty obvious to me. I will say about Benedict Cumberbatch in this film, you know, I when I was in that first hour and I was thinking about like the idea of him being this man who doesn't really fit in the modern world, I thought it was really ironic casting, because for me, as you said, Benedict Cumberbatch did not fit this role.
No.
If it stayed the same as the first hour was portraying it as this sort of gruff, masculine man, and that's definitely how all the ranchers view him.
Yeah.
he doesn't fit that role for me. And I thought that was really interesting, because it was like, the idea is that he doesn't fit this modern world, and at the same time the actor playing him doesn't fit the role, and it felt very like, square peg round hole situation for me, which played in very well towards the end.
So that was the third aspect of that first hour that I was going to draw attention to and say, these are the three things the movie asks you to lean on, the third being Benedict Cumberbatch's performance. So going into it then, I wasn't convinced going into it, but in that first hour I thought his performance was magnetic. Actually, I thought he did a fantastic job of portraying this quite he's not like, talking about that Sam Elliott quote, I think I know the bits he's talking about now. There's a lot of scenes of men bathing together in rivers, and I maybe that's the bits he's talking about. But
Sam Elliott went as far as to say that he didn't enjoy the allusions to homosexuality.
I don't know if it's allusions. Like, we'll get.
Well, that's what I mean. That's in quotes from Sam Elliott.
Yeah, allusions is.
So okay. There's currently, hopefully, I think there's petitions ongoing to get someone to explain the plot of this film to Sam Elliott.
Yeah, they're not being alluded to. I'll tell you that much. They're quite explicit. But okay, so how did you feel that? So I think you've alluded to it there. In fact, so did the performance of Benedict Cumberbatch didn't really grab you in that first hour then?
No, I'm saying I felt that was an ironic positive, right?
Oh, okay,
so I actually, Benedict Cumberbatch is great and everything. I don't think I've ever seen him in a role I didn't like. Now, bearing that in mind, this was a role where he was playing the worst person he's ever played, except for Dominic Cummings. So apart from Dominic Cummings, this is the worst person I've ever seen him play, and I think he did a good job of it.
I'm trying to remember who that is now.
The Brexit film. Dominic Cummings was like the mastermind of the Leave.
I never watched that movie, but I didn't realise he was playing Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, he is, and to be honest with you, I have problems with that movie, because I think that no matter what, that film is portraying Dominic Cummings as like the silent genius behind the scenes, you know. And at the same, but I'm just like, no, this is just a bigot guy who said, let's use Facebook ads, right? He's not a genius. So the trip during lockdowns taught us all that, where he had to go for a drive to test if his eyes worked. But anyway, we'll not get into that.
To a castle.
To the castle, yeah. But no, I like Benedict Cumberbatch in this. I really did. I just felt that the masculine, I was trying to view him through the eyes of his ranchers, and I just don't think he fit that role for me. But the role he was playing in the film, he fit very well through the eye of the audience. Yeah. Just when I was putting myself in the movie, in the film, I couldn't really see myself as a rancher viewing that man that way. But the thing is, as you watch on, it becomes very obvious why that is, because he's playing the character from the start that we see in the second half. It's just we don't know who that character is yet, you know.
I think I see what you mean. I think there's, for me, in that first hour, there's kind of like a vicious competency to him that I can see why the ranchers respect him. Like why I went back to that unfortunate Sam Elliott quote is that he's not a hyper masculine man in, like, I guess what you'd think of the traditional sense, you know, the kind of the strong, violent, although I suppose there are hints that he's capable of violence, but he definitely has an aura about him. But I was totally on board with his performance. That was the thing that really carried me through that first hour, I think.
So even in that first half, you felt there was something sort of, I'm not going to say positive, but something that endeared you to this character? Because that wasn't there at all for me.
I don't know if I'd say endeared, but I was definitely interested in seeing
what's going on with him.
Where he went. In a way that I wasn't with Jesse Plemons, which I think is by design. So before we get into spoilers, I have a question for you here. Jesse Plemons. So I guess most people know Jesse Plemons as the son of a Nazi who orchestrates the downfall of Walter White in Breaking Bad. That's
it, yeah.
That's, I guess, where most people know Jesse Plemons from. And
blonde Matt Damon.
I don't know if Matt Damon would be happy with that comparison, but I mean, he sells
back when he was younger. Jesse Plemons has grown up a lot now.
When he was younger, he's filled out a little bit. Has Jesse Plemons, and to be fair, who among us? It's not me judging him. I love Jesse Plemons. He is a wonderful actor. Is he? Now here's a question for you, Anthony. Is he the worst husband ever in this movie? because some of the
he just disappears. He disappears.
He just
Where's
disappears and leaves his very emotionally vulnerable wife, who has problems with alcoholism, and he knows she has problems with alcoholism, and he leaves her alone for long periods of time with a bunch of ranchers who are on the side of his brother, who he knows hates her. And then on top of that, and I'm not going to get fully into spoilers now, but I just wanted to mention one thing. She keeps he gets fixated in this first hour on this dinner party with some local low-level posh person.
The piano.
And he's like, oh, I'd love for you to play the piano. And she keeps saying, I'm not very good. Like, I don't know why
The governor,
yeah, that's right. And she keeps saying, I'm not very good. I don't really want to do this. I'm a bit nervous. He's like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. You can do it. And then, of course, the event comes and she totally freezes up. And it's like, but why did you made this entire thing happen, Jesse Plemons? It's all I wanted her to divorce him. I wanted her to be a twice divorced woman by the end of this movie.
Well, all I'll say is this is not the first time we've ever seen these two together. So even though there was that distance between them, Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons, I still was rooting for them. I still thought they made a good couple because back in Fargo season 1, in the TV series version of it, they were together, and I thought to myself, every few years, right? Every few years, you think to yourself, who's the new Bogey and Bacall? Is it Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone? You know, who would have thought that out of the shadows comes Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst?
I didn't even know they were together until after I saw this. I couldn't believe it. Like they do a great job of depicting their relationship as awful in a way that probably was quite difficult for two people who are presumably very happily in love. Are they married? I don't think they're married.
I have no idea.
But yes, so I think he's an awful partner, and I love him in this because he's just so ineffectual when compared to Benedict Cumberbatch, who is kind of ruthlessly efficient. So I'm going to say one thing, and before we get into spoilers, there was an actor who was originally cast to play this role, and it wasn't Jesse Plemons. And I want to get your take on whether you think they would have been better or worse. And that actor was...
Do you want me to guess?
Go on, have a guess.
Oh, who's going to play Jesse Plemons? It's got to be Brad. No, it's got to be.
I'm not playing Jesse Plemons, playing the character. I mean, we've already said Matt Damon would surely play Jesse Plemons in the biopic.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to choose Matt Damon, but okay. So playing the character of George.
Yes, George. That's it.
Okay, so who could play George? I'm going to guess Christian Bale. In his and he would completely transform for the role too.
Yeah, he would.
His Dick Cheney version of Christian Bale.
Oh, mate, that would have been a wonderful performance. I would have loved to have seen that. It wasn't Christian Bale, surprisingly enough. It was, in fact, Paul Dano, who was originally cast for this, and he had to drop out to play the Riddler in The Batman.
Well, I'm glad he did, because Paul Dano would have brought a creepiness to this role that didn't need it.
Oh.
He is a creepy, creepy man. I love Paul Dano.
Yeah.
I love him very, very much. But he is at home playing, I assume, I haven't seen it yet, but the Riddler, and at home playing like his character from Prisoners, right? That's who he should be playing.
Yeah. Do you say Dano? I've always thought it was Dano, but now I don't know.
It probably is. I say Dano, but it's one of those things I've read it a lot of times, you know what I mean?
I mean, the number of names that I hear other people pronounce in Hollywood, and I'm like, oh, I've been pronouncing that incorrectly for literally my entire life. So let us know in the comments, Dano or Dano, where do you fall on this hot Hollywood debate?
I have absolutely no idea. Dano.
Yeah. So yes, that's who would have played him. I agree. I think Jesse Plemons brought a slightly more... I mean, I've already said I think he's the worst husband ever, but even with that in mind, I think he's more lovable than Paul Dano would have been. Paul Dano would have been this kind of like crooked spined man who's kind of like, oh, and you know, you're just
play the piano, play the piano.
Like his hands are
I can imagine
to the touch.
I can imagine Kirsten Dunst rolling over next to Jesse Plemons in the morning saying, "Oh, Paul's pulled out," and Jesse's like, "Hang on, I'll fill in for him. Let me get the agent on the phone."
Slides his dungarees on. He's just like, I imagine he already dresses like he dresses in this movie, to be honest. Jesse Plemons just strikes me as that kind of man. So we got him instead. Okay, right, I'm going to say spoilers now, because there's some spoiler stuff I want to talk about. So if you haven't seen this movie, check out now, maybe check back in at the end when we talk about our rating for it. But this is your warning. So, second hour. it's sort of, I've described this, and it's a very, very overly simplistic description. I don't think tonally or in any way other than the kind of central romance does this comparison work. I've described it as kind of Call Me By Your Name meets There Will Be Blood in that second hour. And I'll explain what I mean by that. In that it sets up this core cast of characters. So you've got Kirsten Dunst's character, you've got Cody smit-mcphee, excuse me, and then you've got Phil, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and George, who does kind of disappear from the movie, played by Jesse Plemons. You've got these four characters who are intrinsic to the tone and the story, although there hasn't really been much of a story at that point. And you think that this, I think by the top of that second hour, you're kind of wondering how this mother and son are going to survive this environment, because it's so oppressive and it's so unfriendly. And then it becomes apparent that Phil is a closet, it's never actually said explicitly, but it's implied that he's like a closeted gay man, or at the very least like a bisexual man, someone who has feelings for men as well, and that's revealed through a kind of den of male pornography that I didn't actually write Cody smit-mcphee's character's name down, which is
Peter Gordon.
Peter, that's it. So Peter finds in the woods, and then he sees Benedict Cumberbatch bathing while fantasizing about the old ranch head who it's implied he had a romantic relationship with.
Well, I think I would push back on the word romantic, to be honest with you. I think that it's I read some seedy undertones into that, to be honest with you.
Did you think it was abusive, that relationship?
Oh, very much.
Okay.
Very, yeah, I did. And then that informed the way I was viewing the relationship between the two men again. And in this instance,
so did you see him as kind of grooming Peter then, as well, as a kind of like
100%
the abuse? That's it.
100%.
That's really interesting, because that wasn't my read of it. I can totally see that, but that was not my read of it at all. So from your point of view then, so I'll very briefly say, from my point of view, I saw this kind of wholesome romance developing between Peter and Phil, where I was like, rather than this being an adversarial relationship, he's going to kind of soften Phil through making him realize that he doesn't need to repress his sexuality, and it's going to be a slightly happier ending, and then obviously the ending happens, and that's like a real sucker punch. But from your point of view, it must have been like that's like, you must have had the complete opposite read to me on that.
Well, I am completely blown away by your read on that. I honestly am. I can't imagine viewing this film in a way that hasn't got that implied, grooming aspect to it. I honestly, I can't imagine this film any other way.
Is it suggested that I haven't written down the name of the old rancher? He's got a very old rancher sounding name. It's like Big Red or something.
Rusty McDaniel or something,
like that. But I don't think it's ever implied explicit. At least I didn't notice that Benedict Cumberbatch, that Phil has knew him since he was a child or anything like that.
Well, no, but the thing is, like, he talks about him as like a sort of a fatherly or a mentor figure. This happened. Benedict Cumberbatch is a man who's at most 40. This happened 25 years previous, and as well as that, he talks about the moments where they're up in the mountains together, and in order to have warmth, he brought his body next to him in the sleeping bag, and all of it just surrounded me with that feeling. Also, the idea that this man is the biggest bastard in the world the whole way through, and then all of a sudden he realizes that Peter finds his stash and finds out his secret, and from that moment, the very next scene, the coin is flipped, and he's bringing Peter over to say, "Hey Peter, have you ever made a rope before?" And it's like he's from that point, he is not sinister. He is not calling out things. He's not calling him a fairy, which he was all the time. As soon as he knows, he's like, okay, now I have someone who I can focus on. I need to, the whole way through, I viewed him as grooming him, because he for the first time in his life perhaps thought to himself, I actually have a potential of actually acting out these sexual desires that I have. And then also the idea that he was making a rope the whole time, and he was talking about, we'll make a rope and we'll go out into, from the very beginning, before he even knew Peter personally, he was saying, I'll take you out into the mountains. It was on his mind from the start, and he was making a rope, and all I could think to myself was, he's going to hang him with he's going to go out there, he's going to have his way with him, and he's going to hang him with that rope. That's what I thought from the start of that relationship.
So I didn't get that about the rope. I don't. I just viewed. My read on that was that the reason he opened up was because he realized that Peter was there was reciprocal romantic feelings there, so he opened up about himself and started to be less defensive and less cynical, because like his relationship with the old ranch head, he found essentially a kindred spirit, someone that he could share himself with. Admittedly, the age difference was troubling, because there's probably, even between the actors, I think there's about 20 years difference, and I think the implied difference between the characters is probably even more than that. And that is a fair point about the difference in age between Phil, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, and the old ranch head as well. I don't know. It never felt like it was saying it was abusive to me. I think the setup to me seemed to be that it was that Jane Campion or Thomas Savage, who wrote the novel, wanted there to be this kind of tonal whiplash of, it's really dark in the first half, and then it feels like it maybe is heading towards a slightly lighter, more optimistic conclusion in the second half. Still a very sexual one, and still it does definitely have that seedy undertone that you've identified there, because there is that age difference and there is that power dynamic between them, but then it kind of whips the rug out from under you with that power dynamic by completely reversing it with the conclusion of the film, where Peter essentially deliberately kills Phil by getting him to make a rope for him out of the hide of a cow that has died of anthrax and infecting him. So that's, I can totally see where you're coming from, though, actually, and I'd be fascinated to hear what other people say about that, because it really does alter like your entire perception of that second half.
Well, maybe I should need to watch it again now, knowing what happens in the second half. Like, I don't know, just like, I'm not gonna. Maybe the word predatory is too much, but I even felt like when they went out to sort the big hay bale out, and it's very like sort of forcefully shows Phil slamming a pole in and out of the ground while looking at Peter, and it's just like really forceful and really sort of domineering. I honestly, I couldn't get the aspect of grooming out of my mind. I thought that was happening the whole time, and maybe because I clung onto that, I couldn't see what you're seeing, but I honestly I was very uneasy, and that's the change for me. It didn't go romantic whatsoever for me. There was no romance whatsoever.
By the end of it, I was like, I hope these kids make it.
Really? Oh no!
No, I wasn't. I wasn't quite as. That's me exaggerating for comic effect. I was like, this relationship is more wholesome than I thought this movie was going to go with, and then obviously they whip the rug out from underneath you with that ending. So okay, well they go.
See, that's actually, the rug was still ripped out of me, I will say, because I thought to myself at that very last scene, whenever they were talking back and forth to each other, and there was that really sort of emotional, sort of maybe brushing on romantic scene. I'll admit that. But in that moment, I was watching that, thinking to myself, "Oh no, he's got you, Peter. Oh no, this is the grooming complete." And then it's like, "Oh no, Peter was in control the whole time." That's the rug ripped out for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really interesting that it seems to work both ways. And yeah, like if you've watched this movie, let us know in the comments what you thought about it, because that's fascinating that there's those two different reads on it. So the last thing I wanted to cover then is, at that conclusion, when Peter very deliberately murders Phil via a pretty calculated plan, it kind of cements his position as a psychopath to me. Because there's a moment earlier in this movie, and I kind of understand it, but at the same time, it really stayed with me. The moment where Kirsten Dunst finds a rabbit, and everyone's like, oh, it's a lovely little rabbit, like it's hopping around the house, and shout out for Thomasin McKenzie, like a blink and you'll miss it cameo from her in this movie. She goes, like, there's kind of an implication that maybe she has a bit of an attraction to Peter as well. They're about the same age.
Yeah, there is a little bit there.
And she goes up to his room to get him for dinner or something, and she walks into his room, and he has, without saying anything, dissected the rabbit on his.
He's trained to be a doctor.
He is training to be a doctor, but it is also like, holy shit, Peter! Like maybe things were different 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago now, probably 120 odd years ago. But I feel like that boy ain't right. There's some problems, like in Peter's head. How do you feel that he is, in a way? Well, in fact, I know what your answer to this is going to be because of the discussion we've just had. But coming out of this, I was like, he seems like he might be worse than Phil in a few years' time. How do you feel about Peter at the end of this movie?
No, I loved it. He did it for his mum. He did it for his mum. That's true. He had the moment where he said
he didn't kill the rabbit for his mum. He did that for himself. That was for Peter.
Well, he did that for all of his future patients, and he'll be very good at his job. But he had the moment. Obviously, there's something going on in his mind. Very calculating, very sort of able to do it. Maybe there's a bit of psychopathy there, but he did do it for his mum, because there was a moment where he said, when his mum was really, really drunk, and he was like, and she was trying to hide it or whatever, and he was saying, like, you don't need to do this. You don't need to do this. I'm going to make sure, and he said something like, I'm going to make sure that you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where he's decided he's going to kill Phil.
Yeah.
Because, and actually, we didn't really talk about it, but the torment that Phil puts his mom through was really well done in this film.
Yeah,
I thought that really believable. It had a theme tune. This bullying had a theme tune, and that's what I loved about it.
I didn't write down the piece of music now, and it really annoyed me. And yet another detail that I haven't written down about this movie, but there's that fantastic scene where Kirsten Dunst is kind of clumsily practicing this piece of music that she's going to play for this recital, and she's kind of struggling with it because she clearly hasn't played piano in a while. And then Phil just starts effortlessly plucking away at the same piece of music on his banjo upstairs, and it's just a fantastic moment of just this horrible cruelty in his character, and it just sums up their relationship with each other, and it was so wonderful. I loved that moment. But it's full of them. It really is full of them.
It is. And I just, I suppose I'll summarize this right with this film. The reason why I found the last reveal so cool is because it made the shift for me from, in my mind anyway, Phil grooming Peter. It shifted it to me to Peter seducing Phil to kill him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can totally see that. As I think that's a very valid read on this. Maybe that's just me as an old romantic at heart / potentially incredibly naive, that I'm just like, it's a lovely romance. Like not interrogating it anymore.
And Peter, even though he's very, very young, of course he is, he still potentially seems like he's 18, 19. So potentially, just through his age, I'm viewing it in that lens. Whereas maybe if that same character and everything the same happened when he was 30, maybe I view it differently. Maybe I'm being swayed by that as well.
Well, I think so. Thoughts just come to me that I'll just end with. I think the thing that really sent me down that path was that Peter never really changes at any point in this movie. He's kind of the same character at the end as he is at the beginning, and it's Phil who we see the transformation in. So I guess that's why I kind of had more time for Phil, because I was like, oh, he's learning to open up about who he is and what he feels, and he's spiteful and bitter because he can't be this way around other people. But as I say, I think both reads are equally valid, and I look forward. Yeah,
it's really interesting. It's really interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I honestly thought we both have the same opinions. So that actually that's really interesting.
Yeah, I put it down as a rom-com in my review, which now in retrospect seems very misguided. I didn't actually do that.
I can't wait to see what people think. Like, obviously, I'm reading in I'm reading in like abuse into just a homosexual relationship, which is really paints me in a wrong light.
Yeah.
And you're reading or maybe you're reading romanticism into a grooming relationship.
Yeah, I don't know which of those is worse.
One of us isn't coming off.
See you later, folks. One of us won't be back next week. Okay, so final thoughts then. We've got to give it a rating because that's what reviews do. So where would this land on your 5-star scale?
Okay, I've thought a lot about this actually.
Go on.
And my initial idea was to give it a 4-star.
Oh.
Which is a high score. Let's be honest.
It is. It's the fourth. It's the second highest, in fact.
It is the second highest,
the fourth highest, and therefore ruined the joke before I made it. But we'll carry on.
But I don't know. I'm really to and fro on it. I really am. I'm thinking like, if like I've said this before, if it was out of 10, it'd probably be a 7. But the question is, do I go up or down?
Yep.
Do I go up or down?
Always the question.
All right. I'm gonna go up to 4-star.
Okay.
If someone says to me in the comments, if everyone says to me in the comments that I'm wrong and it's a romantic comedy or whatever it is called meant to be, then I'll be changing that to a 3. But it's a 4 for what I experienced.
So you're crowdsourcing your review to be like, well, whatever the people say.
Listen, put a bit of abuse in there. It adds an extra star for me, Konrad. You know me.
Yeah, that's. I'm not even going to touch that. I'm going to move on with that. I gave it a 4-star as well. I was a bit more solid on it, I think, than you. I got to the end of that and I was like, that was really good. I think those performances were excellent. Cinematography was stunning. Score was brilliant. Like there were enough. I know the first hour asks a lot of you, and I think there are going to be people who are rightfully turned off by how little happens in that first hour. But if you make it through, I think it's got some really good stuff to show you, however you read it.
I agree.
Okay, right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us this week on the Best Movie Podcast Ever, which leaves us with one simple question to answer, as we always do, and that is, Anthony, what's your favourite movie?
My favourite movie is Pokemon, the movie, the first one. I'm watching a lot of Pokemon with my son these days.
Yeah? Who's his favourite Pokemon?
Jeez, have a guess.
Don't tell me he's a Pikachu.
No, thank God, no. It is one of the obvious ones, though, Squirtle. And you know what's funny about that?
Come on now, hold on. Squirtle's not an obvious one. Like I'm
He's one of the 4 obvious ones. Come on. I thought to myself today. I said to my son asked me, "Who's your favorite Pokemon?" And then I thought to myself, I've never even. I don't know why. I've played Pokemon cards since I was a child. I've played the games. I've never had a favorite Pokemon.
Got to get on
I've never had a favorite Pokemon, so until I have a favorite Pokemon, I'm just gonna say Ditto.
Okay, I mean that's a good choice, to be honest. Scyther and Hitmonlee for me every day of the week.
Hitmonlee's
great.
I hate the Pokemon who have like bandages on them, and every one of them have the same bandages.
It doesn't make any sense. But whatever. Like Hitmonlee is based on Bruce Lee, and he kicks really hard, so that was enough for me. I think my favorite movie this week is There Will Be Blood. It's a good movie. Paul Thomas Anderson, good director, it turns out. And that is going to do it for us this week on the Best Movie Podcast Ever. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for putting up with our absence last week. We'll try to limit those as much as possible. And thank you to... I just cracked my knuckles then. I don't know if that was going to get picked up on the recording.
Oh, it will.
Here they are. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can find links to their stuff down in the description below. And thank you to you for joining us once again. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We are the Culture Cave on YouTube, and we're the Best Movie Podcast Ever on podcasting apps. Get involved in the comments. In fact, definitely get involved in the comments for this. Let us know which side of that debate you fall on, because I might have, maybe I'm in the minority here. I'm fascinated to see which of us is cancelled next week. Give a share a like. It really does help. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
And cut.